Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're tackling a huge question. How does a massive centuries-old empire just crumble? In a matter of months, really. Yep, we are talking about the Russian Revolution.
Okay, let's just dive right into the middle of the chaos. So, picture this. It's October 1917. A small, pretty radical political party has somehow just taken over the largest empire in the entire world. I mean, this is a moment that is going to completely change the course of the 20th century.
So this brings us to the big question, right? The one we're really digging into today. How on earth did that happen? I mean, how did a fringe party, a group that was literally illegal just a few years before, manage to take control of a country with 170 million people? To get our heads around that, we've got to rewind a bit and look at the cracks that were already showing deep in the empire's foundations.
All right, so to really understand what happened, we need to go back in time. We're going to see how the stage was set for this massive upheaval.
So in the 19th century, the political atmosphere in Russia was, well, electric. You had all these competing ideas swirling around. On one side, you've got the liberals. They're looking for something like a constitution, a representative government, but, they only wanted men with property to be able to vote. Then, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have the radicals and the socialists. They're not just looking for a few changes. No, they want to tear the whole system down. For them, private property was the root of every single problem in society.
And this chart, wow, this really lays bare the fundamental issue. Just look at that. 85% of the entire population were peasants. We're not talking about an industrial giant like Britain or Germany here. This was a massive, sprawling agricultural empire, and it was all controlled by a tiny, tiny group of elites at the very top.
So yeah, the whole society was basically a pressure cooker just waiting to blow. You've got the Tsar, Nicholas II, sitting at the top with absolute unchecked power. Then you've got millions of peasants who are desperate for the land the noble zone. And in the cities, factory workers are dealing with just awful conditions. We're talking 12, even 15-hour workdays. And here's the kicker. All political parties were illegal before 1914. So there was no release valve. The pressure was just building and building.
And then came the breaking point, World War I. There had been a kind of dress rehearsal for revolution back in 1905, but it got crushed. The war, though, was a whole different story. It absolutely shattered the Russian army. It wrecked the economy. Railways broke down, food became scarce, and it completely destroyed any remaining faith in the Tsar. By 1917, after 7 million Russian casualties, the soldiers just didn't want to fight anymore. The empire was on its knees.
Okay, so that brings us to 1917. This is the year that pressure cooker we talked about finally explodes. And what's wild is that it happens not just once, but twice.
So the first one, the February Revolution, it was just this massive, spontaneous eruption. It really kicks off with a factory lockout in the capital, Petrograd. The next day, you have workers from 50 factories on strike, and women workers, like Marfa Vasileva, are right there at the front leading the charge. By day 3, the Tsar tries to shut down the parliament, the Duma, but it's too late. On the 27th, the military does the unthinkable. They refuse to shoot the crowds. They actually join the workers. Just 5 days after it all started, on March 2nd, the Tsar abdicates. He's gone. A new provisional government is formed. Just like that, centuries of monarchy wiped away in less than a week.
And this quote, it just says it all, doesn't it? From a striking factory worker, Marfa Vassilieva. I cannot be the only one who is satiated when others are hungry. This really hits home, that the revolution, at its core, wasn't about some grand political theory at first. It was about bread. It was about basic survival and dignity.
So you've got this total power vacuum. And into this chaos steps a name you've probably heard, Vladimir Lenin. He comes back from exile in April, and he sees the new provisional government just fumbling. They're trying to keep Russia in the war, which nobody wants. Lenin comes in with these 3 simple, incredibly powerful demands. He called them his April theses. And they were peace, get out of the war, land, give it to the peasants, and bread. And the food shortages. That's it. It was so simple, so direct, and it's exactly what everyone wanted to hear.
Okay, fast forward to October 24th.
The provisional government has basically lost all control. The country is descending deeper and deeper into chaos. And Lenin, who was a brilliant strategist, he looks at all this and thinks, this is it. This is our moment. The Bolsheviks are going to make their move.
And this second revolution, the October Revolution, was nothing like the one in February. This was not a spontaneous popular movement. This was a calculated, planned seizure of power. A special military revolutionary committee was set up to organize the whole thing. Pro-Bolshevik soldiers and workers moved fast, taking over government buildings, arresting ministers. You even had the warship Aurora firing on the Winter Palace, which was the seat of government. And by the end of the day, that was it. The city was under Bolshevik control. By December, they had the whole Moscow-Petrograd area locked down.
So the Bolsheviks have won. They're in power. But you know, grabbing power is one thing. Actually holding on to it and trying to build a brand new society from scratch, that's a whole different ballgame. Their struggle was really just getting started.
And they did not waste any time. The changes came fast, and they were radical. I mean, all industry and banks were nationalized, taken over by the state. Land was declared social property, which basically meant it was everyone's and no one's. Politically, Russia became a one-party state. If you were a political opponent, you had to deal with the new secret police, the Cheka. And on a social level, they banned all the old aristocratic titles. They even created new Soviet uniforms and symbols to try and forge a whole new identity. Well, as you can imagine, these kinds of radical changes didn't go unopposed. It immediately threw the country into a brutal, bloody civil war. On one side, you had the Bolsheviks, known as the Reds, and fighting them were the Whites. And this was a really messy coalition of everybody who hated the Bolsheviks, monarchists, liberals, even other kinds of socialists. And they weren't alone. They got backing from foreign powers like the US, Britain, and France, who were terrified of this new communist state. Now, this is really interesting because it shows how the exact same event could look totally different depending on who you were. So on one side, we've got a Soviet account talking about how peasants greeted the news with enthusiasm. For them, it meant free land, a chance to loot the landowner's house. It was liberation. But then you look at this account from a landowner's family. They say the coup was painless, that the local revolutionary chairman was correct and even polite. It just goes to show there wasn't one single experience of the revolution. It was lived differently in every village, on every farm.
But that dream of a worker's paradise, it soured, and it soured fast. After the Civil War and after Lenin died, Joseph Stalin came to power, and his main goal was to turn the USSR into a modern industrial giant, fast. To do that, he forced a policy called collectivization, basically taking all the farmland away from the peasants and putting it under state control. The idea was to make agriculture more efficient to feed the cities, but the result? It was an absolute disaster, a devastating famine, completely man-made. The number you see here, an estimated 4 million people, died as a direct result of that one policy.
All right, so the revolution didn't just transform Russia. Its impact sent shockwaves across the entire planet. And for the rest of the 20th century, this idea, the Soviet experiment, became a source of incredible inspiration for some and absolute terror for others.
Because for the first time ever, socialism wasn't just an idea in a book. It wasn't just theory from Karl Marx anymore. The Russian Revolution gave it a global face. It was a real place, a worker state that you could point to on a map. And that, you can imagine, lit a fire under communist movements and anti-colonial fighters everywhere, from Great Britain all the way to India. They saw a path forward.
And this brings us to the core of the Soviet Union's legacy, which is so incredibly contested. It's a story of two sides. On the one hand, you have the promise. A really backward country became a global superpower. It developed its industry, its agriculture. The poor were, in theory, being fed. But then you have to look at the price, and the price was steep. It meant denying essential freedoms to its own people, carrying out these massive projects through incredibly repressive policies, and of course, the millions and millions of people who died under its rule.
And so, all of this leaves us with a really tough and maybe unanswerable question, one that the Russian Revolution threw into the spotlight for the whole world to see. Can a society actually achieve true equality without sacrificing individual freedom? It's a question people have been debating ever since, and it's one we're still wrestling with today. What is progress, and what is the price we're willing to pay?